You're standing in a crowded room. Phones are buzzing. Voices are everywhere. And somehow you've never felt more alone. That ache in your chest isn't just sadness. It's something older. Something your body insists is real. Because to your brain, loneliness isn't an emotion. It's an injury. Right now, somewhere in your skull, a region called the anterior cingulate cortex is lighting up. It's the same region that fires when you stub your toe or burn your hand on a stove. Your brain doesn't have a separate alarm system for social pain. It just uses the one built for physical pain. Cut your finger, lose a friend. As far as your nervous system is concerned, the wound is the same shape. Think about how strange that actually is. Evolution had millions of years and an entire body to work with. It could have built a completely separate circuit for heartbreak, a unique signal for exclusion. Instead, it borrowed the oldest, crudest tool it had. The same wiring that tells you to pull your hand off a hot stove is the wiring that tells you something is wrong when a friend stops texting back. That's not an accident or a shortcut evolution forgot to fix. It's a clue about how seriously your ancestors' survival depended on staying connected. Why would evolution do that to you? To answer that, you have to go back, not a few years, not a few centuries. You have to go back about 2 million years to a thin, exposed strip of African savanna where a creature barely stronger than a modern chimpanzee was trying not to die. That creature was an early human ancestor. No claws worth mentioning. No real speed. No fangs. Just a soft body and a slightly bigger brain than the animals trying to eat it. Alone, that creature was lunch. In a group, it was something else entirely. Eyes everywhere, warning calls, shared warmth at night when temperatures dropped low enough to kill. Survival wasn't an individual project. It was a group project, and the exit fee for leaving the group was your life. This is where the psychologist John Cacioppo enters the story. For decades, Cacioppo studied loneliness not as a feeling, but as a biological signal. His research found that chronic loneliness raises cortisol levels, weakens immune response, and increases inflammation throughout the body. Your body, in other words, treats prolonged isolation the way it treats a real, physical threat, not metaphorically, literally. Cacioppo argued that loneliness evolved as a kind of internal alarm, a push notification from your own nervous system that says you're exposed. Get back to the group. Feel that ache when you scroll through old photos of friends you've lost touch with. That's not weakness. That's 2 million years of programming doing exactly what it was built to do. Here's where it gets stranger. In 2003, a researcher named Naomi Eisenberger ran an experiment that would change how science understood social pain. She had participants play a simple video game called Cyberball, where they tossed a digital ball back and forth with 2 other players. Except the other players weren't real, they were programmed, and at a certain point in the game, they simply stopped passing the ball to the human participant. No insults, no cruelty, just exclusion. While this was happening, Eisenberger was scanning the participants' brains using fMRI. The results surprised almost everyone, except maybe it shouldn't have. The same brain region that activates during physical injury, the anterior cingulate cortex again, lit up when people were excluded from a game with cartoon characters they'd never even met. Being left out of a game you don't care about still registers in your brain like a small wound. Now stretch that forward. Stretch it into a modern apartment, a phone with 3,000 contacts and nobody to call, a group chat that's gone quiet, a relationship that ended and left a silence where a voice used to be. Your ancient alarm system doesn't know the difference between being exiled from a hunter-gatherer band on the savannah and being excluded from a friend group on a Tuesday night. To your brain, both are emergencies. This explains something you've probably felt but never been able to name. Why rejection doesn't just hurt your feelings. It hurts. There's a reason people instinctively reach for the same language to describe both. A broken heart, a wound that won't heal, hurt feelings. These aren't just figures of speech. According to research from Eisenberger and her collaborator Matthew Lieberman, The overlap between physical and social pain systems is so strong that taking a common over-the-counter pain reliever has actually been shown, in controlled studies, to slightly reduce the emotional sting of social rejection. Let that sit for a second. A pill made for a headache can dull the sting of being ignored. That's not a metaphor working on your brain. That's your brain running the same software for two very different problems. But here's the twist that makes all of this even stranger. Loneliness isn't just a punishment for being alone. It's a motivator. It's designed to be uncomfortable enough that you do something about it. The ache isn't a malfunction. It's a message. And for most of human history, that message worked exactly the way it was supposed to. You felt the discomfort. You sought out your group. The threat passed. The feeling faded. The problem is that the modern world broke the feedback loop. You can scroll past 200 faces in 5 minutes and feel more alone at the end of it than before you started. The brain's ancient alarm goes off, but the solution it's asking for, real physical presence, shared eye contact, the low hum of being seen by people who know you, isn't what a screen can give it. So the alarm doesn't shut off. It just keeps ringing in the background, low and constant, like a smoke detector with a dying battery. This is part of why loneliness today doesn't always look like being physically alone. Cacioppo's later research emphasized something counterintuitive. You can be surrounded by people and still register as lonely if those connections feel shallow. Quantity was never the variable your brain was built to track. Depth was. Your ancestors didn't need 3,000 acquaintances. They needed maybe 15 people who would notice if they didn't come back from the hunt. 15 people who would share food during a bad season. 15 people whose presence told their nervous system, you are safe, you belong. You will not be left to face the world's dangers by yourself. That number hasn't changed much in your skull. Even if the world around it has changed completely, there's an extension to this story that most people never hear. It involves a small, isolated community studied for decades by researchers fascinated by what happens when a group stays tightly connected across generations. The findings were strange enough to surprise the medical world. Despite diets and habits that would worry a modern doctor, this community showed dramatically lower rates of heart disease than expected. For years, scientists assumed it had to be genetics, or diet, or something hidden in the environment. It wasn't. When researchers controlled for those factors, the protective effect remained. The thing that seemed to matter most wasn't what these people ate. It was how tightly woven their relationships were. Multiple generations under one roof. Meals shared by default, not by appointment. A web of obligation and care so dense that isolation was almost structurally impossible. Your body, it turns out, doesn't just want connection as a nice-to-have. It calculates risk based on it. Researchers studying social isolation have found its health risks comparable to smoking and worse than the risks tied to obesity or physical inactivity. Read that again. Being alone, chronically, structurally alone, can be as dangerous to your body as a pack of cigarettes a day. Not because loneliness directly causes disease the way a virus does, but because of what it does upstream. Elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, chronic, low-grade inflammation simmering in the background of everything else your body is trying to do. This is the part where the story stops being interesting trivia and starts being something closer to a warning label. Because here's what almost nobody tells you about loneliness. It lies to you about its own solution. When you're lonely, the instinct is to withdraw further, to assume the ache means something is wrong with you specifically, that you're somehow less worthy of connection than other people seem to be. But the ache was never a verdict on your worth. It's closer to thirst. Nobody looks at thirst and concludes they're a bad person for needing water. They just drink. Loneliness deserves the same plain, unemotional response. The ache means deprivation. It doesn't mean defect. And yet, modern life is unusually good at making lonely people feel like the loneliness is their fault. Social media in particular creates a strange illusion some researchers call social snacking. Scrolling through other people's lives gives your brain just enough of a connection-shaped signal to briefly quiet the alarm, the way a small bag of chips can quiet hunger without actually feeding you. You get a flicker of relief. Then, often within minutes, the ache returns, sometimes sharper than before, because what you consumed wasn't really food, it was the picture of food. Eisenberger's later work pushed this even further. Her research found that the brain doesn't just respond to active rejection, like being excluded from that digital ball game. It also responds to anticipated rejection. Just the expectation of being left out can trigger activity in the same pain circuitry before anything has actually happened. This means a huge amount of modern social anxiety, the hesitation before sending a text, the dread before walking into a party alone, isn't irrational overthinking. It's your ancient alarm system running a threat simulation in advance, trying to protect you from a wound it hasn't even confirmed is coming. Knowing this changes the question you should be asking yourself. Not why am I like this, but what is this ancient system actually asking me to do? And the answer, frustratingly, is almost never complicated. It's rarely asking for more contacts, more followers, more surface-level interaction. It's asking for the thing your ancestors had built into the architecture of daily survival. Small, repeated, low-stakes contact with people who know your name and notice your absence. A shared meal, a recurring conversation. 15 people, give or take, who would come looking for you. That number hasn't changed much in your skull, even if the world around it has changed completely. The next time that ache shows up, in a crowded room, in a quiet apartment, while scrolling through a phone full of names that don't quite reach you, recognize it for what it actually is. Not a flaw in you. Not proof that something is wrong with how you're built. It's a 2 million-year-old alarm system, still faithfully doing its job, still trying to pull you back toward the only thing it was ever designed to protect you with. People who actually know you're there. And maybe that ache in a crowded room isn't telling you that you're broken. Maybe it's telling you exactly what to do next.